Hey, welcome in. Well, I've got a clip here for you of Joe Rogan going hard at Sanjay Gupta. And Sanjay Gupta is the chief medical guy for CNN. And of course, CNN claimed that Joe Rogan had taken horse dewormer when he got COVID, which was a lie. Joe Rogan had taken medicine prescribed from his doctor. In previous videos, I've taken you to the Nobel Prize page for the people who were awarded the Nobel Prize for developing ivermectin. So everybody knew, as soon as they said horse dewormer, everybody knew that at the very least they were being deeply, deeply misleading. After all, when the doctor gives you antibiotics, you don't say, "Why are you giving me livestock medicine?" But one thing you will notice about this interview is that Sanjay Gupta doesn't seem to be prepared for the obvious question coming at him from Joe Rogan, which is, why did your network say I was taking horse dewormer? It's almost as if that kind of misinformation is so common on CNN, and that's the world that he inhabits, and it's just normal. Because I can't think of any reason why he wouldn't have anticipated being asked that question. Other than that, he just didn't really seem to think there was anything wrong with it at the time. That's just normal. That's just what they do. Anyway, let's take a look at the video.
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing. That's a lie that they're conscious of. This is not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Stop taking this stuff," or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it making the
Nobel Prize
in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, a drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker. This is ridiculous. It's just a lie.
I don't think anyone is.
But don't you think that a lie like that is dangerous on a news network when you know that they know they're lying? You know that they know that I took medicine. Like, here it is. This is ivermectin.
You got
this
it with
right
you.
Here. Somebody gave it to me.
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing.
Do you think that's a problem that your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude,
I mean, what did they say?
They lied
and
said I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
they
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch of other medications.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease, and as you say, it's probably, I think a 250 million people have taken it around the world.
More,
I get that.
Way more.
So
way more. Billions of people have taken it.
Can I just come back to the one I want to talk about? Two things on the ledger.
You have, before we get to that, does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
So as you can see, Gupta doesn't really seem to be prepared for that line of questioning. And he doesn't even really seem to be taking it that seriously. He's conceding, well, no, they probably shouldn't say that. He doesn't seem to understand the point that Joe is getting to, which is, well, actually, let me show you another clip.
But my point is, you're working for a news organization. If they're lying about a comedian taking horse medication, what are they telling us about Russia? What are they telling us about Syria? Do you understand that that's why people get concerned about the veracity of the news?
Yeah, I don't think that Gupta really gets it. He lives in a world where they know best for everybody, and disagreeing with them is, I think in his case, kind of baffling and maybe somewhat amusing. And let me show you this. This is something that Sanjay Gupta wrote, I guess, right after that interview. And this is on the CNN website. Headline, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Why Rogan and I Sat Down and Talked for More Than 3 Hours. And you'll see in this, he still doesn't really get it. In fact, you get the sense from this that he's never actually watched a Joe Rogan episode before. As you see here, he says, I needed to go into the lion's den. Joe Rogan's show is not the lion's den. Maybe it got uncomfortable for you, but these were special circumstances. You work for a network that just blatantly lied about him, obviously lied about him. And you yourself seemed to be fine with it at the time. We have this. Many friends cautioned me against accepting Joe's invitation. There is little room for reasonable conversations anymore. One person told me, he is a brawler and doesn't play fair. Another warned. In fact, when I told Joe early in the podcast that I didn't agree with his apparent views on vaccines against COVID, ivermectin, and many things in between, part of me thought the MMA former Taekwondo champion might hurtle himself across the table and throttle my neck. But instead he smiled, and off we went. Yeah, because that was ever remotely likely. Again, I don't think these people have ever watched any of Joe Rogan's shows. They seem to have a completely twisted idea of who this person is. Of course he was going to smile and then talk to you. Everybody, apparently except for you, seems to realize that Joe Rogan is a kind of a left-leaning moderate. He's basically an old-school liberal. And all he's really doing at the end of the day is asking questions that normal people ask. And anyway, here's this section called Into the Lion's Den. He says, and I just love this. It's as if he's done something so brave, so brave. He's going to be telling his grandchildren one day about the time he went into the lion's den, the scary Joe Rogan podcast, and he escaped with his life just barely. It's so absurd. Anyway, he says, it wasn't what Joe Rogan thinks that most interested me. It was how he thinks. That is what I really wanted to understand. Truth is, I have always been a natural skeptical person myself. Well, how'd you end up at CNN then? One of my favorite heroes, the physicist Edwin Hubble, said a scientist has a healthy skepticism, suspended judgment, and disciplined imagination, not only about other people's ideas, but also about their own. Well, geez, that actually sounds more like Joe Rogan than it does anybody at your network, but okay. Anyway, he continues, it's a good way of thinking about the world, full of honesty and humility. I live by that. And I think Joe may, to some extent, as well. He will be the first to point out that he is not a doctor or a scientist who has studied these topics. Instead, he seems to see himself less a rapscallion and more of a sort of guardian of the galaxy, pointing out the missteps made by large institutions such as the government and mainstream medicine, and then wondering aloud if they can still be trusted to make recommendations or even mandates for the rest of us. To many, he represents a queen bee in a hive mind, advancing free will and personal liberty above all else. Okay, first off, that last sentence doesn't make any sense. A queen bee in a hive mind, but advancing free will and personal liberty? Yeah, this makes literally no sense. But it does reflect the people who would question anything. I'm talking literally anything they say. They must be drones. They must be mindless drones. They must be conspiracy theorists. They must be in a hive mind. I mean, this is all very ironic, by the way. I'm just going to point that out. I'm just going to point out the irony of somebody who works at CNN talking about hive mind. But it shows you the levels to which they're willing to contort themselves to be able to, desperately, hold on to their self-image. And as for this, a sort of guardian of the galaxy, that's absurd. But pointing out the missteps made by large institutions such as the government, mainstream medicine, and wondering if they can still be trusted to make recommendations, I just showed you a clip there, which might seem to have given Sanjay Gupta some pause for thought, right? When they're lying about something as ridiculous as a comedian taking a medicine, they can't really expect people to believe them about anything. That was the point of that segment. And apparently, Gupta learned nothing from that. So the article ends off like this. I guess a small part of me thought I might change Joe Rogan's mind about vaccines. After this last exchange, I realized it was probably futile. His mind was made up. And there would always be plenty of misinformation out there neatly packaged to support his convictions. Truth is, though, I'm still glad I did it. My 3-hour-long conversation wasn't just with Rogan. If just a few of his listeners were convinced, it will have been well worth it. Well, he makes some assumptions here. First off, they can't imagine anybody who would just have even just curiosity, not being part of an irrational conspiracy cult. And again, there's some irony in that, isn't there? But apparently he thinks that all of Joe Rogan's viewers or listeners are a homogenous mass that all think the same, a hive mind, as he said earlier. He seems to be incapable of understanding that Joe Rogan is pretty moderate, maybe left-leaning moderate even, and his audience is moderate. If you're an extremist from whatever side, you don't watch Joe Rogan. The reason that people like Rogan is because he's open-minded and he's not predictable. You can't know what he thinks about one thing and then predict what he thinks about everything else, like you can with, I don't know, corporate media, say. His audience is just normal people with curiosity. Some large portion of his audience is already vaccinated. They're just not in a cult, is the difference. They can handle hearing things they haven't heard before and think about them without breaking out weeping and thinking that it was violence against them or something. I think this last paragraph is valuable because it does show the level of delusion that we see emanating from institutions like CNN. I mean, what else can you say but, let's go, Brandon. That's all I got to say about that. Please subscribe, like, and share. That really helps me out. If you just like to listen, there's the podcast Radio Baloney. It's on pretty much every platform. If you look for it, you will find it. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.